My current position is Vice President, Team Historian, and in charge of archives. And over my 42 years here, I've had several titles. I ran media relations for 25 years and been Vice President of Public Affairs and currently now Vice President, Team Historian, and archives. The Reserve Clause was put into effect back in the early years of the major leagues because the owners were concerned about protecting players and not having them be able to leave the ball club, and they felt that if they put an investment in, that they should have the rights to the player. Of course, it really wasn't fair, but in those days the players didn't have any say. Congress went along and gave them this right to have this reserve clause binding the players to the club that they signed with.
Curt Flood was a baseball player in the late 1900s. He was the first player to challenge the reserve clause, a contract that obligated players to stay with the same team unless they were traded. It was created on December 6, 1879, and many famous players such as Joe DiMaggio were affected by the contract.
In December of 1957, Curt Flood was signed to the St. Louis Cardinals. Then, on October 7, 1969, Curt Flood was traded to the Philadelphia Phillies. Seeing as at the time the Phillies were not a good team, Curt Flood did not want to go to Philadelphia. Due to the reserve clause, he had no choice in where he would go, so he challenged it.
Curt Flood was the person who decided, I'm not going to go along with this. And when he was traded to the Phillies in 1969, he refused to go, and he said, I don't think I should have to do this. And he went to Marvin Miller, who was the new guy in charge of the new players union, and said, I don't want to go, I want to fight this.
In a letter to the Commissioner of Major League Baseball, Bowie Kuhn, he states,
I do not feel like I am a piece of property to be bought and sold irrespective of my wishes.
In response to Flood's letter, Bowie Kuhn said,
Your present playing contract has been assigned in accordance with provisions by the St. Louis Club to the Philadelphia Club.
Well, they were big because Bowie Kuhn was the Commissioner of Baseball, and Marvin was the new guy, the head of the new union. And Major League Baseball, unfortunately, did not think that he was going to have much of a chance to succeed because the unions had never really did much in terms of success with the players over the years because the owners were able to keep them down, which wasn't fair when you look back on it. So they were the central figures, one representing the ownership and the other representing Curt and really the players.
On January 16, 1970, Curt Flood files a lawsuit against Bowie Kuhn and the MLB for $1 million. On March 20, 1972, the Flood v. Kuhn case is brought before the Supreme Court. Curt Flood ends up losing the case.
Well, it went that far because of the magnitude of what was going to happen. That if this, and that's where, if this clause was put in by Congress, and if this clause was going to exist, it came from the highest levels of government. So that's where it finally had to go to be judged fairly.
However, in 1975, Curt Flood and Marvin Miller officially abolished the reserve clause.
First free agents really didn't start until about 74, 75, and there was Andy Messersmith, the outstanding pitcher, and the judges ruled in favor of Andy in terms of his contract and that he could opt to go to another team. And then the first real free agency period came after the 1976 season, when baseball put together a system where those players who were free agents could be drafted by other clubs who were interested. And in fact, the Red Sox ended up signing the first free agent, Bill Campbell, who was a super relief pitcher for the Minnesota Twins and was vastly underpaid and had won the award 2 years in a row. And he decided, hey, this is ridiculous. So, and we took him and we were able to sign him for what seemed like an astronomical amount of money at the time, $100,000. So there were a bunch of players after that 1976 season that came out as free agents. But the key guys were Andy Messersmith, Catfish Jim Hunter back in '75, who ended up with the Yankees. Dave McNally was another one. So there were 2 or 3 guys at that time.
The same year, Catfish Hunter, a right-handed pitcher for the Oakland Athletics, became the first free agent ever in the MLB.
Well, it was huge. I mean, the aftermath really didn't start to take place until about 4 years later, but the fact that they struck down the reserve clause made it a fact that players now could go to some type of free agency, that they had more rights, which they never had. They weren't bound to the team that signed them, and the only way they could get out of it was to retire. So this had far-reaching effects.
The players and teams benefited from the reserve clause being abolished. The players did because they could choose which team to play for, and the teams benefited because they could buy players from other teams to make their team better. Other major leagues such as football and basketball benefited as well because they started to do the same.
I think in the long run, everyone benefited. I think because it wasn't right, it wasn't fair. I think in the beginning, it was like a big thing for the players that all of a sudden, wow, we have a chance. The rules were put into play as to how long before you could be a free agent. Both sides accepted that. At least 6 years with a team, and then you could be a free agent if they didn't re-sign you. So, and it gave other teams an opportunity. Maybe the lower class teams, if they had a little bit of money, they could go after some players of a high quality to improve their ball club and get their fans enthused and interested. We're not going to be at the bottom of the barrel year after year who each one of them signed, and that gets enthusiasm going, better players. So I think in the long run, it's benefited everybody.
Today, free agency is a big part in Major League Baseball. Players make more money from free agency, such as Kevin Brown, a right-handed pitcher who was the first person with a $100 million contract. Also, players such as Jacoby Ellsbury and Alex Rodriguez are moving to better teams because they are being offered more and more money. Alex Rodriguez was recently signed to the New York Yankees for $275 million, the highest contract in Major League Baseball.
Well, it's had a huge impact on Major League Baseball. The fact that it can create interest in cities and teams that maybe have had rough going but have decided, hey, we're going to spend some money. We want to get some good players. Of course, the key is not to spend the money foolishly, to be wise in how you do it. So you need a good baseball operations staff to ascertain the type of quality of the free agents that are on the market and make sure you're doing things that are going to help your ball club. So I think it's helped that way in creating more interest, especially in cities that are having a difficult time.
After the court case, Curt Flood was forced to retire and almost all of his money was lost. He died in 1997 with barely any money. He was one of the only people that didn't benefit from his accomplishments.
Curt unfortunately had some rough going. There's a lot of things that, as you read about him, that he had a hard time getting a position with another team. In those days, this was the first time that anybody did this. Clubs were leery of signing Curt Flood. Even some of the players didn't think it was good. The media, the fans, they're saying, you're going to destroy our cities. Players are going to run off here and there, leave us. And I think he got into alcohol and I don't know what else. And he went off, and I think he ended up in Hawaii. He did a bunch of different things. He was down in Florida. He became an artist. Very talented, intelligent guy. And this, Marvin Miller warned him that this is going to be tough on you and you're going to have a rough go, but we'll go through it if you really want to. And I guess Curt said, do you think this will help players in the future? And he said, yeah, it certainly will. But it's going to be rough on you. And it was.
This topic connects to the theme of rights and responsibilities because the owners of the baseball teams felt that it was the players' responsibility to stay with the team that originally signed them. However, the players, led by Curt Flood, felt it was their right to move to any team they wished.
Absolutely. He was a pioneer. It took a lot of courage from somebody who he had already had like a 10-year major league career. He was a Gold Glove 7-time winner. He was an outstanding center fielder. He had a lot of good things going